If you're here yet, welcome.
No. Okay. Good night. Love you. Hello? This is he. Yeah. Good. Actually, somebody already called. It didn't go back there, right?
Shh. Sorry. All right, guys, welcome again to this wonderful webinar. We'll see if the videos work any better this evening. Again, if you could please have your rubrics, clarification document, and some scrap paper ready so you're ready to script with us. My name is Carrie Gansky. I am the 1A2A State Director for MPSSCC, and I'll be your host this evening. Some people before were asking about how we came up with these rubrics in this scoring system. So just want to touch on that very briefly, and then we'll get started with Stunts and Pyramids tonight. So this is all done by a committee. We have a state committee that's comprised of one representative from each county that's part of our committee. And it also has two state directors, myself and Michelle Dean, he's the 3A, 4A director. Greg is usually there. He's our rules interpreter. And a lot of the ADs, the athletic directors, supervisors from every county that's included are also there. And then within that, we come up with a mini committee that looks at the rubrics and looks at the scoring system. We keep in mind the trends of the industry as well as what's good for our high school kids, what we're seeing on the mat, what our coaches are telling us, all that kind of stuff. So within that committee, that mini committee, we, come up with some draft ideas, and that again is comprised of coaches, judges, and the directors. And so we try to get input from all different sides, and we come up with, the rubrics or any changes we want to make. They get feedback from their high school coaches, and then we put it out for a vote to the actual full committee, and then they vote on it. And it's a majority vote. So, however many votes come in, that's how it gets made. So somehow along the way, I just became the keeper of the formatting and all that stuff. So that's why I get roped into doing this. So I love it though. All right. I also need to apologize because I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. So hopefully I won't cough all over you guys tonight, but it should be pretty, a little bit quicker than last night or last week because we don't have to go over all those general rules. So I'm just going to dive right in with Stunts and Pyramids. For those of you that are newbies, this is new for everybody because we switched the Stunts and Pyramids rubrics for this year. So everyone's new, so don't feel bad. All right, so just like before, I just want to kind of touch on the scoring breakdown. We have total possible points is 130. That's the total score sheet points out of all the categories. Stunts is 20 points total, much like jumps and pyramids. So, or this score sheet is broken down like stunts, like jumps and tumbling. So stunts is 20 points. Degree of difficulty is 10. That's from the rubric. Depends on what they do. Technique and execution is 10. That's how they do what they do. They are not connected at all. Pyramids, again, 20 points, degree of difficulty, 10 points, which is based on the rubric. And then again, technique and execution, 10 points, which is how well they do what they do. And again, degree of difficulty and technique and execution are not really connected. You can, like we talked about with tumbling, even if you have basic skills, but you're doing them with precision and with correct fundamentals, we want to reward that. We want to reward teams that are being safe and, going through those progressions. So a team with perfect preps across the board, if they're tight and straight and, the timing is great, they could get a 10. It has nothing to do with how difficult, for technique and execution, it has nothing to do with how difficult their routine is. So again, just like jumps and tumbling, this is 31% of the entire score. So about a third. We're going to talk about technique and execution first because it's kind of the same for both stunts and pyramids. We're asking them to build, raise people up in the air and all that stuff. So we want to look at the entire stunt and the entire structure. So bases, back spot, and the flyer. Sometimes we get so focused on the flyer. What are they doing up there? Obviously, that's the person that the audience's eye is drawn to. But as judges, we really need to look at the entire stunt group, because sometimes the flyer is wobbling around because the bases are standing way far apart, or the back spot is kind of just lollygagging back there and not pulling up on the stunt. So really think about that. Obviously, look at the flyer too and their flexibility. Think about the skill from start to finish. So the load in, How are they getting into the stunt? Are the bases bending with their knees and not just leaning over with their back? Are they standing close together? Are their elbows tight and in? All that kind of good stuff. Is the flyer keeping her butt tucked under? Is she, pushing off of the base's shoulders if that's what's appropriate? All that kind of stuff. Then the actual skill, what are they doing in the air? And then, of course, the dismount. Timing and stability within groups and across groups. So we're looking at synchronization as well as, especially in pyramid, but also in stunting. So within the group, are each individual group stable? Are they walking half a mat or a full mat to keep that stunt up, or are their feet planted and firm on the ground? Across groups, is their timing good? They're going up on the same count, they're hitting their skill on the same count. And then for the flyers, obviously flexibility, limb placement, not just legs and feet, obviously, but also arms. Are they consistently placed? Are they have good motions? All that good stuff. You can circle the listed comments on the sheet to save some time, especially at the playoff level at semis and states. But we do at invitationals want you to write lots of comments because that is where they go to get ready for counties and states and semifinals. And again, just remember that this is based on the majority of groups. So sometimes they have like 3 really strong groups and 1 group that's kind of struggling, but they need it for their numbers. And so if that's 1 group that's struggling, you could take off a 10th maybe, but I wouldn't hit them too hard because the other 3 are the majority of the team, and it is a team skill and a team score sheet, right? Team sport, that's what I'm trying to say. And then, of course, you can also keep in mind spacing, formation changes, timing, and pace. Sometimes formation changes can add to the effect or can add to the timing and pace, and sometimes it can take away. It kind of depends. So if they're using it effectively, great. If not, that's something that you could factor into your technique and execution. Keep in mind that, Keep in mind that the overall judge is also going to be looking at formation changes across the entire routine. Any questions so far? I think what we're going to do eventually is create a video that is just about technique and execution for each of the categories. And we'll give an example of this is what a 5 looks like. This is what a 7 looks like. This is what a 10 looks like. That probably won't be a live training. It'll just be like another resource to make sure that we're all kind of being consistent across competitions with what we're giving. Okay, I'm going to move on then. You guys are a little bit behind me. I think you're like 3-second delay or 5-second delay. But I'm not seeing any questions coming in, so we're going to move on. Here are just some examples of constructive comments. Angie sent out that great list of comments as well. We want to be constructive, but we don't want to choreograph for them. If they had a skill, they would have put it in. So don't be like, oh, you should do extended paper dolls. If they had paper dolls, they probably would have done paper dolls. Okay, so just remember that. We don't want to choreograph for them. We want to help them improve on what they're showing us. So a great one that I like to use a lot is bases stand closer together for stability and control. And the clearer you can be too. So sometimes I'll even draw little X's on the comments sheet and circle the group I'm talking about. Like these 2 groups need to really, focus on the bases standing closer together. Flyers hollow out and squeeze core during twisting. Bases throw to extended position on cradles. So you're looking to make sure that they're not just pausing, at the prep line, but they're really pushing through that cradle. Watch spacing and opening sequence. Again, that's a good one because it tells you exactly where the spacing was an issue. If you just write watch spacing and they have, 3 different stunt sections, they're not quite sure what you're talking about. Work on timing among stunt groups and cheer. So that's like across groups, and then flyers work flexibility on front stretches. Sometimes we see groups that have really good front flexibility, but poor back flexibility, or, either or. So that would be a good comment to do too. Okay, degree of difficulty. We are going to dive in here it does get easier. I know there were some people that were feeling a little anxious after the last training. It gets much easier. It's a lot to take in all at once, but as you get into it, and remember, you're only doing one of these categories at a time. So you're only going to be worrying about jumps and tumbling, for example, or you're only going to be worried about stunts and pyramids at a competition. You're not doing all of these categories at once. So that helps limit it too. Just a couple notes on all the rubrics. I don't think I went over this last time, and I think it's kind of important. So numbers matter. We have to count the athletes. Usually your head judge will do that. Some competitions will help you by asking them ahead of time. But we always want to confirm that what the coaches tell us is true. And not that they're trying to lie, but sometimes they just forget, or they had an injury, or they added someone at the last minute and they just can't remember. It happens. So we always want to count the athletes. Sometimes it's easiest to count them, especially depending on how close we're sitting to them, when they're in stunt groups. So you count, if they have fronts, you just count by fives. If they don't have fronts, you count how many groups times 4. So they may ask, the tumbling judge may be able to count that quickly while you're scripting the stunting. Specific skills matter. And we did talk about this with jumps and tumbling, but we need to script appropriately. You can't just be like, okay, they did a specialty mount, a transition and a dismount. We need to know exactly what they did. Was it a switch up? Was it a high to high tick-tock? Was it a 360 switch up? Everything's based on that sliding scale. So the things that are harder need to be given more weight on our rubric. It is a range. And so therefore you need to know exactly what they did. So come up with a shorthand that works for you. And I'm going to show you an example of mine later. Come up with a shorthand that works for you, so you're not writing out switch up every single time. Read the clarifications and definitions at the top of each rubric. Obviously, read the clarification sheets. Rubrics are based on ranges, except jumps and tosses. So the elements listed are the minimum they need to get into the range. So if they do exactly what's listed, they get that lowest number in that range. So if you're looking at your stunt rubric, for example, on a team of 20, let's say 4 groups do thigh stands, and that's it. That's the only thing they do. They're going to get the 1.0 because the expected number of groups performed stunts below prep level. That's all they did. They didn't do anything else. They're going to get that 1.0. Now, anything extra will help drive their score in that range. So even if they are in that 8.5 to 10 range, let's move up there. They've done all the things that are listed here, but they add an extra body position. They add an extra row of fulls that are just not connected. A group of fulls that just go up and they, during their cheer or whatever, and they hit their little letters on their full. All that counts. It doesn't have to be things that are listed here to drive the range. It could be any other stunting skill will help drive that range, or anything extra that they do. We don't count intentionally illegal skills. We're not asking you to know all of the rules, but if your head judge says, don't count that it's illegal, trust them. If the safety judge comes and says, don't count that it's illegal, trust them and don't count it, okay? We can't be rewarding teams for illegal things, right? And then pay attention to the number charts on the rubric. So we've made it easier by just making it 1 column instead of 2 columns this year. So it should be easy peasy. And again, just like jumps and tumbling, we do not expect you to memorize that chart. That's why it's on the rubric for you. So speaking of that chart, the definitions are at the top of the page. The chart is at the bottom. So numbers are different than last year. So when we're used to seeing like 20 to 24 last year was a different thing, we've taken away that majority of expected groups expectation. We lived with that for 2 years, and the committee felt that our teams were advanced enough or able to just go with the expected number of groups. Many of our teams were doing that anyway because they were confused by this chart for whatever reason. And so we felt like it was an okay change. It is still based on a group of 5. So it counts group like 20 to 24. You could probably have 5 stunt groups. A lot of our teams will do that. They'll throw the extra one, and that can count as a driver for the range too. But this is with front spots on there. So if you have 20 people, 5 people per group, including that front spot, then you can create 4 groups. If a team doesn't perform any stunts, they score a 0. So nobody is ever picked up off the ground. They score a 0. Very rarely do we see that. Bigger ranges at the low end. So don't kill teams, reward what you see. So wait, is that true? A little bit. So the 1 to 2.5 range is a little bit bigger than the other ranges until you get to the top, which is 8.5 to 10 range. So those are a 1.5 spread instead of just a 1 point spread like everything else. If you're noticing that we're now in the 0.5 ranges here, not newbies, we did adjust those ranges because a lot of the judges and coaches too, once we explained, felt that a lot of teams were getting into that 9 to 10 range, especially at the semifinal and final level. And so we didn't have enough room to really reward, to separate teams, I guess. So we want to really reward teams that are doing the really hard skills or doing more than one sequence, but there wasn't really a lot of wiggle room to do that. So now we've added a 0.5 to that range. So we have a little more room to move some teams around or to really reward those teams that are doing the harder skills and separate them from the teams that are doing the basic things to get into that range. All right, everything else is 1 point. So here we go. Like I said, looking down that score column, the ranges have adjusted. It's going to be a little bit of an adjustment change for those of you that have judged stunts and tumbling before. It's just a matter of reminding that it's now the 7.5 to 8.5 range instead of the 8 to 9 range. Still 1 point. You still want to use the whole points. You can use tenths of points. But we're just kind of opening up that upper level. And I believe we did the same thing in pyramids as well. Yes. So the pyramids and the stunt rubrics are very similar. At the top, the definition sequence. This is the same definition that was on the tumbling and jump rubrics. Elements performed at the same time in a section in the routine. This can include elements performed in a ripple. Specialty mount, transition, and dismount does not include basic tap-ups, bump downs, basic cradles, tap to squish, or other fundamental mounts or dismounts. If they're just going straight up or straight down or basic cradle, that's it, or like a squish to up, that also doesn't count. All right, so a straight leg or post and lib position are not considered advanced body positions. Any other position is considered an advanced body position. Okay, so just if they dangle that leg, it's called a dangle, a post, a straight leg, what else? A platform, or a lib. Those are not advanced body positions. So we're going to go from the top down because you don't, unless it's like a really novice JV team, we kind of are not really in that 1 to 2.5 range. So if we go up to the 8.5 to 10, expected number of groups. So again, looking at that expected number of groups is from the chart at the bottom. So if you have 20 team members, we're looking for 4 groups to complete all of these things. So again, expected number of groups perform the following within the same sequence. So it has to be, they can't do part of this, transition to jumps, and then come back and do more. It has to be all within the same stunt section, stunt sequence. So they have to do extended single leg stunts with 3 advanced body positions. These body positions do not have to be connected. They just have to be within that sequence. They need to do 3 different, and that's a key word there, specialty mounts, transitions, or dismounts. That slash there means or. So, and I hate to keep bringing up last year, but just for those of us that were here last year, we required some very specific, they had to have a mount and a dismount, and then they had to have certain transitions in between. This year, we're trying to open up the creativity. We're trying to get away from, was that really a mount? Was that not a mount? Was it a transition? How can we count it? That kind of gray area. So we're just lumping it all together. They just need to have 3 different specialty somethings in the routine. So that means it could be 3 mounts that are different. It could be 3 transitions. They could go straight up and then do some crazy transitions in between three different ones. Or they could do 3 different dismounts or any combination thereof. So 1 mount, 2 dismounts, 2 mounts, 1 transition, however they want to get to that 3. One of those 3, however, must include a vertical release to an extended position. And that is similar to what we had last year. All right. So all 3 of these, gosh darn, all 3 of these, I'm just going to stop moving. All 3 of the bullet points need to be checked off in order to meet that range. And again, if they just do those 3 advanced body positions, they just have 3 different specialty mounts that are very basic, like maybe they do a switch up, quarter down cradle, and a walk-in lib. Those are probably the most basic things that would meet this requirement. That would be like your 8.5. Okay. 7.5 to 8.5. Very similar. However, we're kind of just bumping down, kind of stair-stepping down our requirements. So the expected number of groups performs the following, again, within that same sequence. Extended single leg stunts with 3 advanced body positions, so that remains the same. And now we're only requiring 2 different specialty mounts, transitions or dismounts, and we're not requiring that vertical release to extended. 6.5 to 7.5, same thing within the same sequence, 3 advanced body positions again, and now only 1 specialty mount, transition or dismount. 5.5 to 6.5, within the same sequence, now they only have to do 2 advanced body positions and at least 1 specialty mount, transition, dismount. Again, these are ranges. So sometimes we'll see teams doing those 2 advanced body positions, but they have 3 or 4 specialty mounts, transitions, or dismounts. They're still going to be in that 5.5 to 6.5 range because they haven't met the 3 body positions requirement to move up. But since they added extra mounts and dismounts, that will drive them up in the range. So they could be closer to that 6.5 and not closer to that 5.5. So you're kind of looking for, okay, did they have 3 advanced body positions? Yes. Then I know I'm 6.5 or above. How many specialty transitions did they have? They only had 2. Okay. So then I look, I know that I'm in the 7.5 to 8.5 range. Okay. Expected number of groups perform extended single leg stunts with 1 body position. Okay. So we went from 6.5, 7.5, and 8.5 is 3. 5.5 to 6.5 is 2. Now 4.5 to 5.5. God, why did we do that? It's so awkward. They only have to do 1 body position. And again, it doesn't say advanced body position. So if they just go up and hit libs at an extended single leg level, that counts here. Okay, so we've taken out that word advanced. And then 3.5 to 4.5, expected number of groups perform full extensions or single leg shoulder height stunts. We'll see that sometimes on JV teams or our more novice varsity teams. 2.5 to 3.5, they're performing 2 leg stunts at prep level. And then 1.0 to 2.5 is stunts below prep level. If they have a variety, so sometimes our JV teams have that one really stellar stunt group that they put in the middle, and she can do like her bow and arrow at extended level. Bully for her. The other 3 groups in the back are just doing libs. If they need those 4 groups, we're going to assume that the girl that can do the more advanced stuff obviously can do the less advanced stuff. So the majority of them are doing extended single leg libs. That's the rubric range they're going to be in. And then that one extra little Sally Sunshine who has her bow and arrow, she can get an extra 1/10 of a point because that was extra than what they needed, right? So that's something that your head judge can also talk to you about. It's a little bit of a juggling act, but you'll get used to it. All right. Hopefully this will also make more sense as we get into the examples. But it's basically a checklist. You just want to check to make sure. But it is important too, again, you're not just tallying advanced body positions, right? You want to know what it was. Was it 2 stretches and an open stretch? Was it a scorpion, a scale, and an arabesque? Was it 2 scorpions? Were they doing needles? Whatever they were. Obviously, they can't do needles, but what are they doing? And same thing for those specialty mounts, transitions, and dismounts. It's very important to know what exactly those were because there is that sliding scale of difficulty, and we need to be rewording our team's consistently. All right, so here's a clarification document, and guess what? Since I made this training video, or this training thing, there's already been a change, so we'll go over that. So again, if we're looking at the clarification document, this is number 5. I think, I don't know what page it's on, 3rd or 4th page maybe. The top range was adjusted. We talked about that. Required number of groups have changed. We talked about that. All bullets in any given range must be met to get into that range. So, for example, the extended single leg, a switch up to extended single leg cannot count for both the specialty mount and the release to extended. They still need 3 different things. They can't double up. If only the skills are listed or performed, that gets you into the range. We talked about that. Advanced body positions don't have to be consecutive. So, for example, a team could perform a scale and then open up to an arabesque. They could then reload, tap the ground, go back up and hit a heel stretch. So they're not all connected in the air at the same time. And that would hit the requirement for the 3 advanced body positions in the same sequence. Okay, it kind of opens up the creativity there a little bit. The required, specialty mounts, dismounts, and transitions must be attached to the same stunt sequence. So like we were talking about before, all of these bullet points have to be met in the same sequence. They can't do like the 3 advanced body positions and then transition to jumps and then come back and do another set that has the specialty mounts, transitions, and dismounts. It's not cumulative throughout the routine. We have to see it all at the same time. But they could be in any combination. So you have to script the whole thing. Okay. This is the second page. Okay. Sorry, I just couldn't fit it all on the same slide. We talked about I up there. Okay, it could be any combination of mounts, transitions, or dismounts. G, specialty mounts and transitions do not have to land at or come from the extended position, except for the vertical release has to land extended in that 8.5 to 10 range. That is the only time we require a specific, requirement for the mounts, dismounts, and transitions. But it doesn't specify 1 foot or 2 foot, so it could be either. Specialty mounts, and we had issues with this last year, and hopefully this change in allowing them to do any kind of these will help with this discrepancy. However, if they only do 3 things and you're trying to decide if it was an actual mount, then we have to use the momentum from the mount to go to the stunt. So again, not a load in, a normal tap up, or squish position. So sometimes what we'll see is they'll do like a back handspring and then they'll rebound into a squish and then they'll wait 3 counts and then they'll like bounce 3 times and then go up. That's not a specialty mount. It's choreography. You back handspringed and then you paused. The momentum from that back handspring or the rebound from it did not carry you into that stunt. So here are some examples of specialty mounts: switch ups, twist ups, inversion that goes directly up to a stunt. A handstand on the ground that's assisted to a squish and immediately in the same bounce is taken to an extension. To get into the elite level categories, we're looking for the momentum of the specialty skill to carry you directly into the mount to a stunt. Okay, so here are some things that are not specialty mounts. A handstand on the ground that is assisted to a squish, and then the base is bounced twice before completing the extension. Again, if you're bouncing twice, you've now created your own momentum and it's not from that handstand. Like I said, back handspring to cradle, pop to the ground, normal tap up to lib. Not a specialty mount because you are normally tapping up. A walk-in approach to a lib load, but the flyer taps more than once before going up. We see this a lot too. We want the mount to carry the momentum up into the stunt. They did get better at this towards the end of the season. So hopefully going into the season, they get it by now. A vertical release to extended position requirement. We went back and forth about this at our state meeting on Monday. And they decided, so when we had the rubric committee meeting back in May, at that meeting, we decided that a vertical release, the definition of that really in the NFHS handbook is that it must start at a prep level or above, so at prep or at extended level, and end on either 1 or 2 legs. at our committee meeting on Monday, there had been a lot of confusion about this because nowhere in the NFHS handbook or in any of our documentation besides this little H right here is vertical release officially defined. So it's kind of touched on in the NFHS rules, but NFHS does not, and that's our governing body, they don't define it specifically. So a lot of coaches were having issues like, does the switch up count? Can that count for the vertical release in that 8.5 to 10 range? And the committee voted and they decided that yes, a switch up can count for the vertical release requirement. That may change, not this season, but we may revisit that later. But as we're getting used to this new rubric, and we've gotten tons of questions about that through our chair inquiry email as well. So we're going to allow it this season. So yes, a switch up can count. Now, again, a switch up is probably one of the easier, a straight switch up from ground straight up is probably one of the easier vertical releases that teams can do. So if they are doing that, that weight isn't as hard as doing like a high to high TikTok, obviously. So we have to kind of be on that sliding scale. Now, if they're doing like a twisting switch up, that takes a lot more effort and a lot more skill to do correctly. So that can be higher on that sliding scale. All right. So I'll have to change this on the clarification document and send it back out. Please remember, excuse me. That is a note for the coaches. We don't have to worry about that. All right. So drivers, any questions on the clarification document so far? Oh my gosh, you can hear my husband coughing too. So he gave me this cold. Isn't marriage wonderful? We share things. I told him keep it to himself, but he didn't listen. All right. I'm not seeing any questions coming in yet. If, however, you're processing all this stuff and you have questions later, by all means, feel free to email Angie or myself. Our contact information is in that jumps and tumble video from last week. And you can always reach out in the Facebook group as well. So remember, increasing in range. So it is a range. There is a sliding scale. The things listed are the minimum required. I can't stress that enough. If they're only doing exactly what it says on the paper, they shouldn't get very high in the range. We have teams that will add 2, 3 different stunt sections in their routine, and they will meet that 8.5 to 10 range in each of those stunt sequences. Okay, so we need a room for them to have the points that they need. Adding skills, mounts, dismounts beyond the minimum, obviously. The speed or the pace of the sequence could also help. If they're going real fast, they're not waiting a long time, they're utilizing all the group members, that's the next bullet point, that can help with difficulty as well. The faster you go, the harder it is sometimes. All right, so number of groups participating, we require, that should be a change, sorry. We require the number on the chart. Most teams will throw more if they have enough people to. So in our 20 to 24 range, they could potentially throw 5 stunt groups, and some of them will. If they have fronts or not. If they're using fronts, that's easier. If they're not using fronts, that's harder. So, kind of keep that in mind too. And it's a juggling act. So, sometimes maybe they're using fronts, but they're doing, double up to lib. Or, that's super hard. Or maybe they're not using fronts, but they're doing something super easy. So, you kind of have to weigh your options and think about how you want to place them. And that's, again, why we have head judges, and it's never a decision you have to make on your own. You can always, talk to your other fellow judges. And then obviously the combination of skills and transitions can also play a factor in difficulty. Comments for degree of difficulty. We don't spend a lot of time commenting on their degree of difficulty unless it's because of a fall, or if we think that it's because they're misinterpreting the rubric. So here are some things that could come up. Again, we don't want to choreograph for them. We could say, consider connecting the specialty mount to the first stunt sequence if they have it somewhere else. If they already have something somewhere else, so you know they can do that skill, you could suggest that change because maybe they're not reading the rubric correctly. If they don't have a specialty mount anywhere else, don't write this, okay? You could write something like pace is slow throughout transitions, clean up timing so we can see the skills. That's my nice way of saying, like, you look a hot mess. You need to like figure out what you're doing. We can't tell what you're doing. Clean up timings. We can appreciate your skills. On a team of 20, you need 3 groups completing the skills. That might be if they have a fall or if they're ghosting a stunt, just so they know, like, hey, you didn't meet the rubric range requirements. Good use of team skills and understanding the ability of your team. I love using that one when they have very solid fundamental skills. I think it's important to award and applaud coaches that understand the ability level of their teams and don't try to get them to do things that are scary. Libs don't count as advanced body positions, and don't write this, add extended single leg stunts. That's a no, yucky one. Don't do that one. That was my which one of these is bad comment game that we were going to play, but I don't have time. So don't write add extended single leg stunts. If they had them, they would do them, right? We don't want to choreograph for them. See, oh, look, I did cross it out. So good. All right, scripting and tracking, very important. Just like we talked about with jumps and tumbling, you have to script correctly and you have to use your tracking sheets. It's essential. So important, lots of O's. Bring paper with you. You can't guarantee that they're going to have it there, especially at invitationals. Find a shorthand that works for you. Again, I'm going to show you an example of what I use, but you need something that you're going to be able to understand, kind of like the stenographers at court cases where they have to, use shorthand. You need to find something that you can understand. Record all the transitions, no tally marks. Again, I can't stress that enough. We need to know if it's a switch up, a double up, inversion up, whatever it is, we need to know. Judge from the tracking sheet first and then transfer to the score sheet. So instead of just bringing your score sheet out in front of you and writing numbers on it, if you look at your tracking sheet and you're comparing teams, because it is comparative scoring, then you have less of a chance to put the wrong score on the score sheet and have to cross it out. Coaches hate that. Compare to teams who are similar. So you don't have to look at every single team you've judged so far as difficulty goes. You can look at just the ones who are within the same range and compare what they did versus the team you're judging right now. Teams can get the same score, and that score could be a 10. If they're doing perfect things, then why not reward them for that? And again, as you're scripting and tracking, don't forget that technique and execution. So I know it's a lot. We get all bogged down in what skills are they doing, but we also need to know how well are they doing those skills. So after your section is complete, you just want to make a couple little notes to remind yourself of that. The good thing with this category judging is that there are little tiny breaks here and there, right? So as they're doing their jumps or their tumbling section, that's when you could be, just jotting down some things about their technique and execution of the stunt section you just watched. And again, you can find a shorthand for that as well. These are some things that we use sometimes. T off for me means the timing was off. You may want to make a note about the flexibility of the flyers or anything like that. So here's an example of what I might do. So I know if I'm reading this means the top line there, 4 back handspring inversion to release. So a released inversion to a load. Then they twisted, single twist up. They did a stretch, a bow and arrow, a scorpion and a scale, and then they twisted down. The 2 lines for me, that means that it's a whole entire new section. So they have gone off, they've done jumps, they've done something else. And now they're going to, later on in the routine, they're going to do another stunt sequence. So later they have 4 switch ups, but 1 fell. So only 3 of them did the stretch the stretched and then extended. And then they pressed back. So they switched up to a stretch. Then they went down to an extension. They pressed down and pancaked out. Only 3 of them did that because 1 of them fell during the switch up. So my little notes here, the twisting timing was off. They waited too long in the inversion for my taste, and they had good flexibility in the front, but shaky flexibility in the back, or their stunts were shaky when they were doing their, scorpion and scale, the back flexibility skills. I don't know if anyone else can read this. I know what it means, and that's the only thing that's important, right? You need to find something that works for you. And again, the number is important. How many skills, how many people are doing the skills, and if they do have a fall, we need to know that, because if they are required to have 4 groups, one group falls and they only end up with 3, that's going to take down their score. They're going to move down in the range. And we'll talk about that because one of my examples has a fall in it. So we'll talk about how we piece it together to try to give them the benefit of the doubt. All right. A couple more things, and then we're going to do a quick, example. All right, so we can only judge what we see. We need to give credit for the attempt. Even if it hits for a count, we can take off an execution. So as long as they make it up there and it kind of sticks, okay? If they're falling, like during the switch up, if they don't ever even hit at the top, the leg doesn't lock out, the arms don't lock out, then we don't count it. But if it hits even for just one count and then they shake and they fall, we still count. We give them credit and difficulty and we take off an execution, and then obviously they'll probably get the fall in their safety sheet as well. So if they do have falls, does it take them out of the expected groups or not? Sometimes they throw that extra one up there just in case one falls, and then they still have the 4 that they need or the 3 that they need. So things to keep in mind. Did they attempt to get back in it? Did they still have enough skills to be in the range? So sometimes if they fall out of one of the skills, that flyer their group could get back up into it, and they can do the rest of the sequence and still meet the range, or at least meet a higher range. We'll look at the difficulty of the skills performed by the rest of them. You still want to script it. It's not just like, oh, well, they only have 3 groups, so I'm not scripting it anymore. No, you still need to script it. And then you need to have a conversation with the head judge, so you can decide if you want to put them on that overlapping score. So if you notice in all of the ranges, the bottom score of the one range is the top score of the other range. So that 8.5 could either mean that you're at the very top of that 7.5 to 8.5 range, or it could mean you're at the bottom of that 8.5 to 10 range. So we kind of give that little bit of crossover for situations like this, or for if we can't agree on what skills. The head judge thought she saw all 4 of them do switch ups. You thought you only saw 3 out of the 4 do switch ups. If you really can't decide and it needs to go to the team, the benefit goes to the team, especially if that's the one thing that's keeping them from getting in that higher range. And then you make a comment about it. You got into this range today because you had a fall. You got this score 8.5 today because we thought we weren't sure how many switch ups you have. Please define your skills in the future. Always, always, always make a comment about that. Okay, so let's practice. And hopefully this will work a little better than last time. If not, I completely apologize. Hi, everyone. I'm going to try to pull up my videos. And hold on. Sorry. If this is a little bit shaky again, I think it has to do with like the Wi-Fi ability where I live or something. I don't even know. But if it is a little shaky, you can see all of these videos on the same playlist that I use for this training. So they should all be there if you want to go back and practice later. Okay. Just make sure this is coming up. You guys are a little behind me. Any other questions so far? Okay. So this is a team, I believe they're from Illinois. So clearly they're not on our specific rubric, so they haven't choreographed for our rubric, but they do follow NFHS rules. So you'll see similar skills. This team is a team of 20. I've already counted them for you as your head judge. So if you look at your score sheet or at your rubric sheet, we are looking for we're looking for 4 different groups to complete the skill. All right, so this year we need to see 4. So I'm going to play this for you once. I want you to script it. I will tell you there are 2 different stunt sections. So we'll watch one and then we'll watch the next one and then we'll kind of talk about it. Okay. So here is the first stunt section. Maybe. Here we go. Oh, come on. Don't do this to me. Okay, I don't know if full screen's going to work. I swear to you, I tested this like every other day and it was fine. And now, of course, I go to do it here live and it's being a pain in the butt. All right. We'll give it a little time here. All right, so 20 athletes, we're looking for 4 groups. Nope, just a minute. Oh, technology, why do you hate me so? All right, so they do 1.5 up to bows, and then they come straight down. And now they're switching. They do like 2 show and go libs, and now they're into a different sequence. All right, the next sequence is coming up here shortly. Here it is. I'll just let this play. All right, so now they have 5 groups, so they have 1 extra than what they need. So frustrating. I'm so sorry. Oh, we'll have to find something different for next time. I thought this was such a good idea too. YouTube doesn't want me to use YouTube videos live, I guess. Let's try the second sequence again. Here we go. Low to high stretch TikToks. They're hitting that stretch. Press down. .360 to prone, and they're rolling out. Back walkover straight up to extended arabesque. 1 falls. They still have 4 groups. There's a scorpion scale and a kick twist dismount. Okay, so again, we're looking, I'm gonna give you time to process that, but we're looking for those bullet point list. So the first thing I like to do is personally, after I script everything, I'll go back and I'll underline all of the body positions. So right away, I know that that first stunt sequence at about 1 minute and 10 seconds, yes, they had their 4 groups. They did a specialty mount. They only had 1 body position. So I'm not even going to look at that right now. Okay. The majority of what they did was in that second sequence. So I'm going to look and see how many different body positions did they have, or how many body positions did they have in that second sequence at 135. They had the low to high stretch TikTok. They had an arabesque. They kicked it forward, which they didn't really hold that, so I wouldn't count it. But then they did the scorpion and the scale. So for me, they had 4 different, and it doesn't have to be different. Our rubric doesn't say that the body positions have to be different. But because they are different, that can help drive the range. As they hit all of them, right, pretty much. And then they had the bow and arrow earlier too. But so in this one sequence, I'm going to underline where I wrote down stretch, arabesque, scorp, scale. And that way I know I can count real quick which ones I underlined. So yes, they hit that bullet point. So I can check that off. Then I'm going to look to see if they had 3 different specialty mounts, transitions, or dismounts. And this is why it's important that you need to script exactly what they did. So in this stunt sequence, they had the low to high TikTok. They had the full twist to prone. They had the roll out of their stunt. They had the back walkover that went straight up into the arabesque. And then they had the kick, twist, dismount. So on my sheet, what I like to do is circle the specialty mounts, transitions, and dismounts. So I underline, it's just visual for me. That's what I like to do. You don't have to do that, but I underline the body positions and then circle the transitions. And I do the same thing for pyramids. When we get there, I'll underline the structures and I'll circle the transitions. So in this case too, do they have that vertical release to get them into that 8.5 to 10 range? And the answer is yes. That low to high tick-tock counts as that vertical release to extension, right? They're starting in a prep and they're releasing to that extended position. So because they have all those bullet points checked, and they have 5 different specialty mounts and transitions, I know that that vertical release isn't double dipping. It isn't counting as 2 different ones. So they're in the 8.5 to 10 range. They had a variety of things. I mean, the rollout on the ground isn't that hard, but that back walkover straight up, that was pretty cool. And they also had the 1.5 up earlier when they did the bow and arrow. They had a whole second set of stunts. So I'd probably put them mid to high range, depending on what everyone else threw. I know it was hard to see in the shaky video, but for me, the timing was a little off, especially in their transitions, but they had very good body positions. And so that kind of stuff would factor in for, help me out. That stuff would factor in for the technique and execution score for me. It was pretty good. I mean, overall, their air basques were up, their chests were up, all that good stuff. All right, we're gonna look at another one. And hopefully maybe it'll work itself out and it won't be so jumpy. I don't know why it's being so dumb. Maybe I should just go to Starbucks next time. I think that's a good excuse. Like, sorry, I have to go to Starbucks. You think Tim would buy it? I think so. Is Starbucks even open this late, or would I have to go to McDonald's? All right. Here's another group from the, I think this is Iowa or Indiana or some state that starts with I. Again, they're not choreographing to our rubric, but they are using NFHS rules. So it is, it kind of does comply. So again, this group has 20 athletes. So we're looking for 4 groups to complete the skills. Again, they have 2 stunt sequences. So again, just like tumbling or jumps, once they finish their one section, don't count them out, because don't write a score on the sheet, because they could have another one coming up after that too. All right. So you just need to be mindful of that. Here we go. Iowa really likes twist ups, I've noticed. Right, so they have 5 groups. I'll shut up. Okay, so that was the first sequence. I'm going to fast forward it a smidge here to the second sequence. And then we'll go back and talk about it. Okay. Give you a minute to process that. I'm going to try theater mode. Maybe that'll work better. Okay, so we have this opening sequence. They have 5 groups. They do a double up, a double twist up, 2 libs. Then they hit that stretch. They hit an open position, which was kind of meh for me. They hit an arabesque, and then they press down and they do single leg pancakes. and then they move out of that sequence, right? Check me if I'm right. Double ups. Yeah. Arabesque press to roll out. Actually, I don't even know if I would count that arabesque because it was kind of on the way down, transitioning. It wasn't even ad extended that long. Then the next sequence, they only have 4 groups, but with 20 athletes, that's all they need. They do a 1.5 up to a front stretch. They hit a very beautiful scorpions, an arabesque, and then they kick twist out of it. And that's all they do. So right away, I'm just going to start underlining and circling, and then I'm just going to count them up and see which sequence gives them the most points. So in that first sequence, they had 2, maybe 3. You could talk with your head judge if you're going to count that arabesque. 2 or 3 body positions, but they only had 2 transitions. They had the double up, and then they had the single leg pancake dismount. In that second sequence, they had 3 body positions again, stretch, scorp, arabesque, and then they had 2 transitions. They had a specialty mount and a specialty dismount, that 1.5 up and the hitch kick twist. So in either sequence, they are hitting, at least in that second sequence, they're definitely hitting 3 body positions with 2 different specialty mounts and transitions. Again, we're not cumulative, so we're not counting them up across both sections, just in one section. What's the most they do? That's going to get them in the range. And then everything else is gravy. So they have 3 extended single leg stunts with 2 different specialty mounts, transitions, or dismounts. So that's going to put them in this